Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about domain knowledge. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, "Hi Frederick, thank you for your videos. I watch every single one." No worries. Question though, what do you do with an excellent programmer who has been in the organization for a year now, but they do not know anything about the domain? They are good at programming, but they don't know anything about the domain after a year despite constant help from coworkers. The organization is tiny with almost 10 people. Well, it depends a little bit about what you mean by the domain, but I'm just going to assume now that the domain is like your overall work practices and the overall way things are working in your company, because the domain could also be within the code, for example, how specific entities work and so forth and so forth. And if we're at that level, it's slightly different, but it seems to me more likely that you're talking at the macro level, like overall, how do you do things and how do you execute certain tasks and so forth within the company. And so what I usually do here is that I introduce support duty. Some people call it like goalie or something like that, like support team goalie. I don't really like that. I like to just call it to be a support person or having support duty. And the basic idea is very simple. So one of the things that practically every single software company, I will say every software company almost without exclusion, is pretty bad at, is to document things at all. And something that I usually do is that I don't put a lot of emphasis on documentation that isn't really necessary. But what I do put a lot of emphasis on is to create step-by-step guides or checklists, basically, for how to execute a specific task that is something that you need to be able to do in order to fix an ad hoc request, like a classic one. Restart the server, check the logs, check the metrics, give access to a given system, etc., these sorts of things. Or get yourself up and running with a project, like what things do you need to install and what do you need in your environments and so forth and so forth. And the reason why I do that is because it takes basically the same amount of time. If you do this as a habit when you start a new company, guys, I can promise you will have it is a very simple thing to do. It's just that you have to remember to do it. Just write down all the steps you took, basically like a checklist. I did this, then I did that, and then I did that. I went to that URL, and so forth and so forth. And then people can just follow along. This is what some will refer to as a playbook, but it's basically just a task list or like a to-do list. And when you have a few of those for standard tasks that you need to be able to execute, then basically you have the foundation for someone to be able to do something, maybe not as efficiently as someone who has been doing it 100 times, but they can go through that guide and execute the task. And this is where the support role now becomes fairly important, because what you want is to, at least what I do, on a weekly basis, rotate who is responsible for dealing with ad hoc requests, answering questions in your channels, or like doing things or fixing, as I said, restarting servers or debugging an issue or something like that. The reason why you want to rotate it is because this organically breeds domain knowledge into the group, and people get to be accountable. Basically, it's literally like being on call, but during office hours usually. And each team member now has to take responsibility for that. They know how to do all this stuff. They have no excuse anymore. There are guides for some things, but they need to practice doing this so that it actually sticks with them. Because if they only have to do it every so often, it might be something that slips their mind, etc., so that they might not remember it. But this creates a situation where they now are accountable for doing the work that is necessary for them to learn how the domain works. And what happens now is that, and this is very important now, and then now you as a team, you sort of have to commit now, because what usually happens when this is introduced is that people will still go to the senior or the person, the girl there or that guy there who knows how to do it extra quick or so forth and so forth. And what's important now for you to, as a team, is to commit to this. If someone goes to someone other than the person who is on support duty, point them to that person or ping that person so that everything goes through that channel. Even if that means that they immediately go to you afterwards and check, how do I do this thing? And whenever you get to realize that you're answering questions over and over, that it's the same question over and over, write it down. Write it down, as I said, in these little step guides or so forth, so that you can just refer them to, yeah, you should do this, you should do that. I usually have a monthly review if the documentation is changing often, so that you review the documentation, so you make sure that it is relevant and so forth. Because by doing this simple thing, you are changing the behavior in the individual from that, oh, I don't really have to take a responsibility for this because I can just ask that person or that person, to saying that, no, actually you are equally responsible to know this thing as everybody else. And that's a mutual commitment. One person is committing to learning the things that you might know, and you are committing to making sure that they have the information they need in order to solve these problems. This is a formula that I use in practically every team, and it always has a positive outcome, and very quickly you realize that very stable teams are usually teams where there's not just one or two people who really takes responsibility for like the domain and knows everything and so forth, and then you have like everybody else sort of just do their coding and they don't give a fuck. That's the recipe for a really imbalanced, like a lopsided team. The best teams are the teams that have a general good distribution of the domain knowledge. So what I want you to take away from this is that the way that you fix that someone isn't really getting to understand the domain and so forth is, in my opinion, you create a support duty rotation on the team, where people are where you go from that you ask for help if you don't know something, to you are responsible for providing that support to other people as well. So you have to learn it so that you can provide that support, and that means that you as a person who might be very good or like know exactly what to do and so forth, you must take a step back, write some guides, write some documentation, so that you can offload some of that work to somebody else, so that they can go out on their own and try doing the things that they need to be doing. That investment, and then to pair that with making sure that when people then come to you or so forth, that you point them to the person who's on call, is going to mean that they have to take responsibility for learning these things and actually remembering them, because otherwise people are going to get frustrated with that they don't know, etc., etc., because they have to do it. That's the thing, right? It's the same thing with kids. Like, you force your kids to do homework, you could do it for them, but that hurts them. So make sure that they do it. It's the same deal here. And if you keep this up, they will start adopting, yes, because otherwise they won't be able to do this. Basically, they will start understanding the domain out of pure necessity, and that is a much better situation to be in than that they only come and ask you when they don't know how to do something. Because as I said, guys, not everybody has that retentive memory that they do something once or twice or something like that, or even 5 times. If the time period between they have to do these things is long enough, people don't remember. So write it down so you don't have to remember stuff that you keep on doing over and over, and then set in practice this, because it basically gives the entire team practice sessions on being responsible for being the go-to guy or girl for these sorts of topics. And that is a very good thing for you to do if you want to go on vacation and not get called for every little thing, or you're going to have support and on calls and you don't want to be called by your junior at 5 o'clock in the morning or like 3 o'clock in the morning every single time because they don't know how to check the logs. Have a great day.